now we can discuss about the our actual database concepts. Okay, so now in the beginning of the class we discussed what is the database. Database is a container, right? So, but the thing is like database is a collection of the files. Those files are MDF and LDF. Okay, so our actual data will be stored in the MDF and LDF. The logically the data will be stored in the tables and views and stored files. Using the this functionalities, the data will be returned from the MDF. So what is that means? Whenever you're creating the table will have a kind of a rows and columns. The rows and columns will go to the page. The page will go to the extent, and the extent will go to the files. Those files are MDF. Those files will fitting into the database. So now we can discuss about the what is the MDF and what is the ALDF. Okay. So like now we'll go for the theoretical concept. Tomorrow, once we install the our software and once we create the database, we can see the practically for the this MDF and NDF files. But now, but now let's understand the theoretically what exactly this MDF file is going to do, what exactly this LDF is going to do, and we can discuss. Okay. So now let me go for the here. Yeah. So previously, like we discussed, right, what is the file? File is a collection of the records. But the thing is like the file, if you convert to the SQL server, the definition, if you going to convert the definition to the SQL server side, what is the file? The file is a operating system file used to store the database. Okay. So this file will having a two naming convention. One is logical name and another one is the physical file name. So the logical name we can see in the database properties, and physical file we can see in the our operating system. The thing is like the logical name and the physical file name, we can see the our database properties. Okay. Those things tomorrow you can easily understand when we created the database. But the thing is like what is the file means, like the file is a physical operating system file used to store the database data and objects. So data and database objects, nothing but like the tables. What exactly the tables? When we create a table, the table will have it has to store the data, right? Why? Because whenever the people are entering the data from the front end application, the data will become. So the data will insert as a rows in the table. But where exactly the data is going to store? The data is going to store in the file. The file it exactly is going to store in the our operating system. That is storage. So the thing is like not only database. If you want to store the data, means it has to require some files. That files must be occupied some storage in the operating system, right? So like that in the SQL Server also, the file having is nothing but a operating system file that used to store the database data and database objects. Those objects like in tables and indexes and storages and views. So the thing is like here the transaction log information as well. So we have a two kind of a different. One is called like a tables, index, stored phrase, and views. And they mention like a R. That is R is nothing but a transaction log information. So whenever we creating the database, whenever we uh, define the database to store the database will having the two core components. One is data file and another one is the log file. So whenever we creating the database having the two files. One is MDF and another one is LDF. So here MDF is used for to store the permanent data. So MDF means like a, to store the permanent data, and LDF, the LDF is used to store the any modifications occurred in the our transactions those records will be stored in the LDF. So LDF is not going to store the permanent data, but what are the data is going to modify from the MDF, those data will be storing into the LDF. Now this concept we can discuss about the database architecture. Okay. So what is the MDF? MDF is the primary data file. So whenever we creating the database, we have a two files. One is MDF and the another one is LDF. So MDF is the primary data file and LDF is the transaction log file. So the MDF is used for to store the permanent data and LDF is used for to uh, store the what are the transactions are modified from the EMDF pages. So now we can go for the LDF definition, then we can see the EMDF. So now let me see here. Then we can go for topic over topic. Yeah. The primary data file. Whenever you're creating the database, we will have the two file set. One is EMDF and another one is LDF. So the primary data file will be extensions of MDF. So the file can be we can see as a .mdf in the our SQL server. Okay. So whenever we create in the database, it will having MDF and LDF. So this MDF, each and every database, we can see only one MDF. That is the primary data file. So this is the main data file for the database. It contains the startup. Yeah. So this MDF will store the files. Okay. What is the file? File is a collection of the rows. So these files will be pointing into the EMDF. Each and every database, we have one EMDF, and each and every database, we have one primary file group. Okay. We have one primary file and we have one primary file group. So what is the file group? File group is nothing but a collection of files. So this we can discuss, we can understand when we creating the database and we can see the file group. Now we need to understand what is the primary. The primary file is nothing but a MDF. That MDF will store the permanent data. This .mdf file will sitting into the our storage locations, and this MDF and logical names we can see in the database. Now we can go for the transaction log file. So the transaction log files is used for the to store the what are the modifications occurs on the transactions. Those transactions will stored in the transaction log file, and this transaction log file initially each and every database one LDF file, and we can create number of transaction log files on the database. Okay, so in each and every database we have only one MDF extension. Okay, and we have a transaction log file. Whenever you create the database, that will come only one LDF. In the future purpose, if you want to create, we can create number of transaction log files. The transaction log files are used for to store the what are the insert and update and modifications are happening. Those transactions will be tracked or recorded in the transaction log file. The thing is like we can create n number of LDF. And what about the MDF? We cannot create multiple MDF files, but how about the data is going to store? The thing is like what I mentioned, the MDF file is for the two data storage. What are the data file we are going to keep in the that particular storage? If it is full, the particular MDF or that particular storage structure or storage device is full, and then how can we accommodate for the future data? So for that, to store the permanent data, the SQL server is offered for the secondary data file. The secondary data file we can action like a NDF file. These are optional data files. So these are the optional data files. But the thing is like in the better practice purpose, we can ask the DBA team or we can ask the team to create multiple ND files in the multiple disk. Okay. Should not be created in the same disk where we have the MD file. Those concepts we can understand in the our upcoming session. But now you can understand the terminology, core concept of the keywords. Okay. Primary data file is MDF, that is used for to store the data. It contains the files for the to access the database, and these files is nothing but to point us in the our operating system. And each and every database having only one primary data file, which by default belongs to primary file group. So we have a secondary data files that also used for to store the data. These secondary data files are optional, and generally we can recommend it to create multiple secondary files for the larger database. Why? Because to improve the better performance. Why? Because if you go converting into the one example, we have a one room. In that room I have a kept the all the belongs to my business or my personal. Like I have a uh, uh, like a what I meant to say. I have a cupboards. I have a kind. I am going to keep the class in that class. I'm going to keep using class and unused class and iron class. I'm going to store some data for racks for my money. If I going to keep enter in the one room, okay. If I ask the people to bring the data, what will happen? Every person has to enter the one room and they have to bring the data, right? So that means that particular room is always busy. If you going to put the all the data in the one file, what will happen? What are the location storage we allocated, that always busy. And we can see the IOs like input output. Why? Because if I want to bring the usual class, I have to enter in the one room. I want to get the unused class. The same room I have to enter. I want to get the some the money. I want to enter the same room. So that means that particular room I want to go for three times and I have to go search for that particular room. So that room is going to go for having burden for IO burden. So for that, to reducing for accessing the disk, so we can recommend it to create a secondary data file to distribute uh, distribute the data between across the files for the larger database. Okay, smaller database that is okay. But the thing is like bigger database always go for multiple data files. Okay, that is secondary data file purpose is to store the user permanent storage. Now, yeah. So now this is the definition for the primary data file and transaction log file definition. I hope you understand, but let me give one more thing. Okay. So the thing is like whenever you're creating the database having two files. One is primary data file and transaction log file. So here, how many files can be created in the our SQL database? So one primary data file, transaction log file. Okay. So in the database, we can create up to 3 to 767 files. Okay. This 3 to 7 6 files combination of combination of combination of data files and log files. If you want to create all 3 to 767 data files, or we can create 3 to 767 log files. But we should not create 32767 data files and 3276 log files. This number combination of the data and log files. So here I'm mentioning data files. So the primary only one data file. So the remaining what is happening like a secondary data files. Secondary data files. So this combination of how many like 32767, those may be data files or log files or maybe individual data files, individual log files. So here one primary and remaining data files. Okay, so in the database we can create 32767 uh, 32767 files. Just your keyboard is moving. Okay, so in that one database we can create up to 32767 files. Both are data files or log files or combination of the both. So here the thing is like each data file we can keep up to 16 TB data. Okay, and each log file you can keep up to 2 TB. So interview they will ask how much each data file can be accommodate for the each file. So each file we can accommodate up to 16 TB and each log file we can accommodate up to 2 TB. So that means you can calculate if you want to keep means entire data means like 32767 into 16 TB. That much of data can be stored in the our database. So, but we don't have that much of in the real time. The server will be cry because we need to allocate that much of resource. But the interview they ask what is the data file size limit 16 TB. That is for up to each file. Okay, and each log file we can keep in the 2 TB. And one more thing is like for the log file is not belongs to any file groups. So log file we don't have any file group naming convention. It's like a normal file. So the interview will also will ask the log file belongs to which file group. So for the log file we don't have any primary file group. It is like a none. For the data file we have a file group. Initially whenever we create the database, the file will have the primary file group. If you want to create, we can create multiple secondary file group as well. Okay, so that is a very important interview. They may ask for the screening testing. Why? Because they want to test our fundamental of the SQL server. So the thing is like, can we keep the transaction log file in a file group? No. Why? Because for the transaction log file, we don't have any file group, that is a none. What about the data file? Data file, we can keep the file groups. The default file group is a primary file group. If you want, we can create a multiple file groups. And they will ask, how many file groups we can create in the our database? The number also same, 32767 file groups we can create on the database. So here the number of files 32767 and the number of file groups are 32767. Okay, and the database count also 32767. In the one SQL server and one software, we can create up to 32767 databases. Okay, this is for the our database kind of like a MDF and LDF one line statement. Now we can go for the transaction log file architecture. Once we complete the transaction log file architecture, then we can discuss about the our database architecture, how the data is retrieving and inserting from the database. Let me stop the recording now. Let me take for 5 minutes break. Then we can start with the 6 5. Okay.